So, Emily, how does it feel to be my colleague today, too?
It's been horrible, actually. Just kidding.
Excuse me. By the way, Emily, colleague, like side hustle colleague, but also like main hustle colleague. I don't think main hustle is a real thing. What is
main
it?
job.
That sounds lame.
But even so, like, we're not really coworkers. I came over to work with Janice from home, and
she was stressing.
It's been a crazy day.
She was sweating from sitting on a chair staring at her computer coding. How do you sweat from that?
I was literally dripping with sweat, like typing in my Slack message, and I was like screaming for you. We were both like at opposite sides of the house, like yelling at each other.
Yeah, we are.
And it got really intense at times. I think I called you out for your bad hand-eye coordination at one point.
Oh yeah, which, by the way, Emily just like said that as an insult, but it's completely true.
It's completely true.
There was only one time where my hand-eye coordination, I was so shocked by it.
When?
It was when I was throwing a football on the beach and I caught every single one. And I was just...
Was it a mini football?
No, it was a normal-sized football.
That's crazy. I can't imagine that.
It was the most incredible, like, thing in terms of my hand-eye coordination. I don't think I would ever want to throw a football on the beach again to ruin that memory. Like, that needs to be preserved.
Yeah. I mean, there's reasons why we aren't professional athletes and why we work
at corporate. Why we do this and why Emily sweats when she codes.
Exactly. But yeah, today was just kind of a stressful day. I feel like you and I have been having a lot more conversations about stress at work. And so today we thought we'd take it on our lunch break to have a little chat about being corporate girlies.
Hi, I'm Janice.
I'm Emily.
And this is 4 years later, where
we talk about the unglamorous parts about being in our mid-20s as Asian American women all 4 years after college.
Okay, so this unglamorous corporate girly, you need to tell us more about why you're so stressed out. Where is it coming from? Well, I know where it's coming from.
We know where it's coming from. We had a little conversation about this last week, but I just had my performance review as it is the end of the fiscal year, and it was kind of like it was actually a self-evaluation. I haven't even like talked to my boss about it yet.
Wait, what? I thought this was a real... Emily on the phone, Emily was like, I just had my performance review. So this was totally self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Like self-critical thinking. And beating yourself up.
Yes. I did have to submit it. I had to like send it to my boss.
Okay.
But like we haven't like gone over it together. So, like, I think it's nerves from my own, like, perspective of my work lately, and then, like, being scared of what he might say about it.
I think also us being really good overthinkers.
Absolutely.
And psychoanalyzers. We are very good at imagining the other person's response as we are saying something. And that person is either not in the conversation or like has no idea that we're having this conversation with ourselves in our head.
Yeah,
and that's
constantly.
probably what was happening when you were doing your self-evaluation.
It was exactly what was happening, and I think I'm lucky and I'm unlucky, right? My boss is amazing. I'm not just saying that because we're being recorded right now, but he's incredible, and not only is he like ridiculously smart, he's also really emotionally intelligent.
That is rare.
Super rare. And he's a guy.
Amazing.
It makes no sense.
We love high EQs.
We really do, especially in like a tech environment. I feel like that's really hard to find. But anyways, I think what happens is because I know how good of a person he is and like the way that he's able to express emotion, I'm like, okay, now I'm like double overthinking. Because I'm like, well, wait, what if he's being so nice to me that like he's actually annoyed at me, but he knows that like he doesn't want to hurt my feelings?
It's the reverse psychology thing.
It really is. Yeah, I'm like constantly worried that I'm like disappointing him. I'm making him look bad. And like, especially when I started like labeling out all the things that I really wanted to work on for the next year, I was like, wait, I kind of suck at this job. Like, maybe I'm not meant to do this job. And it really got me in this spiral hole. Like I was like calling Janice in tears, not just in tears, like ugly crying to you.
In voice memo.
In voice memo, yeah. It was embarrassing to say the least, but that's how I was feeling.
I think But I don't think you should be embarrassed about it.
It instead of like making me feel more comforted, it actually stressed me out more because I'm like, if you're able to like to understand like and have empathy for where I'm coming from in my life, I hope like I wonder if he's using that as a way to be like, oh wait, Emily might be going through this. I need to be really nice to her when I respond. Maybe she's having a bad day. I'm not gonna like say how I really feel about it, and I'm just gonna like sugarcoat everything.
But I think that he's done enough, and also he's done enough where when he asks you a question about how you're doing or what you're feeling, those are things that managers don't need to care about.
Yeah.
He could easily say something like, I'm really sorry that's happening to you. Now, can you do this? But
True.
he keeps asking you questions about like how you're feeling, even if it has nothing to do with work. And I think at that point, that's when we maybe take it at face value.
I was just gonna say that's something that I think I really need to work on, and that's exactly that you've told me. It's what Barry has told me is like, wait, you're like stressing out over something that no one has told you you're doing wrong yet. Like I'm creating this narrative that doesn't even exist yet,
but
right?
It's hard because nobody is also telling you that you're wrong, right?
Yes.
If you keep it all in your head, which I used to do all the time, then you kind of feed yourself this like persuasive argument where you're like, okay, he did this one thing wrong and now he's mad at me and now he's trying to be nice because he doesn't want to hurt my feelings more and he knows I'm upset. And all of these things like we're going through alone in our heads, and until you kind of give them life, even if you shouldn't give them life, it becomes really hard to know when should I stop.
Right.
Like,
right,
where
right.
am I going insane, right? Because, I don't know, for me, it's like, if I don't tell you something and I don't ask you for validation, sometimes I'm like, oh, am I being too nice on myself? Am I making an excuse for myself?
Okay.
Am I being, like, ignorant right now? Trying to be like, oh, you're doing such a great job, Janice. You really tried your best. Like, this isn't your fault at all, you know? I hate it when people say, like, this isn't your fault. Because I'll be like, well, why did it happen?
Yeah. Then whose fault is it?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's not really anybody's fault, and sometimes it's really not my fault.
Yeah.
But I'm like, no, I was involved in this situation. I need to be the one to fix it and learn from it, or else it will happen again. And if I say it's not my fault, then I'm like, oh, then I'm just being ignorant. I'm going to like not learn from this and repeat the same mistake again.
But I think also on that vein, like let's say in the event like you maybe are wrong, right? But like it's not that big of a deal. You can still be wrong on something and like the impact can be really, really small. But I think for us in being overthinking, we blow up that event and it's like suddenly it's like the sky is falling, right? Like that's exactly what I was calling you about. It's like I made a mistake at work and it was my fault. Like, I'm the one that wrote the code.
Do you want to share what that mistake was? Because I don't think anybody knows what's happening right now.
That's fair. I wrote some code and I wrote the date with the wrong year.
Which personally I don't think is like a huge deal because it doesn't fall on you. Like I get that you're using the wrong year, but I think like everything else is correct and
yeah,
you're on a team for a reason, right? People are supposed to check your work and you have a manager for a reason. And it is like to be that last line of defense. It's not all on you to do everything.
And we were able to catch it like pretty quickly. And because it was literally just like the year was incorrect, I just switched the year to 2022 and then I re-uploaded the data. But I think in that moment, like I made that situation so horrific in my mind. I felt like I shouldn't be doing this job anymore. Like I felt like this was such a small, stupid mistake that like
How could you miss it?
How could I miss it? And why? And if someone else was doing this job, like they wouldn't have missed that little mistake, right? And it was like insult after insult to myself, like all at once, and I just like crumbled.
I think it was also like this one thing set off a bunch of insecurities, right? That all kind of encompass the imposter syndrome.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the one thing that it set it off was like, I don't belong here.
Yeah.
Like the work I do isn't good enough. And then also, I think something you brought up to me was like, sometimes when my manager tells me things, I don't actually understand what's happening, but I just
Yeah.
say yes. Or like
Yeah.
sometimes when my manager gives me work and I'm already overworked, I say yes because I think that that's going to be more credit to my name.
It's the judgment. It's like this fear that if you don't say yes, I understand it immediately, you're like, the person or your manager is going to be like, oh, you don't get it? Like, this was so easy. Like, this should have been something you should have known 2 months ago or when we did this last year or whatever it is. I think it comes across as like feeling ashamed, I guess.
I had this issue too when I used to be at work, and everyone on my team was so smart. I was the only one who couldn't code or like read code, and I had to learn it. But everyone had also been in finance at least 6 more years than I have been.
Oh my God.
So I was like, well, sorry, at least 4 more years.
That's a lot more years.
But then immediately I was like, why am I not at their level yet? Why am I like, and
I do that
as
too.
they're teaching me something,
Yeah.
they're looking down on me.
Right.
And why can't I understand it? And I couldn't really understand the gap. I was like, who cares if they have 4 more years?
We're the same level.
Yeah, I also have a brain that like, why can't I be smarter?
How did you get out of that thought process?
I think it was a lot about just, well, the biggest thing that helped me was this thing that a lot of managers say, and it's like, no question is a stupid question.
I hate that.
It's an awful statement. Because
Yeah.
you're like, I know this is stupid.
I know it is.
But
yeah.
there are different levels of, like, if your question is truly stupid, you can always either ask Google or someone that is the same age as you, same title as you. And if
Right.
there isn't that, that gets really hard. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what I had. I didn't have anybody except for
Right.
someone that was 4 years more senior than I was.
But
So-
then you're still afraid to ask them.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because I'm like, okay, there are stupid questions. But the more I thought about it, I was like, it's not my fault that they didn't have enough money to hire someone that's also my age or
Right.
like someone that's in between. And also, like, if I were to ask this question a year down the road or 2 years down the road, they would probably be like, why don't you know that already?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened to me during one of my performance reviews. It was like, it was an informal one in the middle of the year. And I had 2 managers back then. And so one of them was like, Janice, I'm a little bit worried. This is a red flag that you don't know that. And it sent me spiraling. Like, I went down this rabbit hole. It was terrifying because I was like, the whole imposter syndrome thing, it just all came up. I was like, I'm going to get fired. I can't believe I missed this, but I don't know how to fix it, and I don't know who to turn to for help. And then my other manager had come back from maternity leave, and I told her what happened. Also, the other manager told her what happened. And she was like,
Oh, God.
I see Janice's gap, but that's actually our fault because COVID happened. I started the job 3 months into it. COVID happened. We all started to work remotely. And then my manager gave birth and left. And then the other manager gave birth and left after she came back.
Oh, my God.
And I was basically on my own, just having been in this job for 3 months, like trying to figure out exactly what this job is, but also learn.
Yeah.
And I put my learning on the back burner to be able to complete some of like the more mechanical stuff.
Right.
And so my manager actually started to do one-on-one catch-ups with me for an hour every Friday. And that really helped. It was like an open slate of me just asking any dumb question I wanted. And she really made sure
that you got it.
That I got it, because every time I said something, she could sense if I didn't know it or not. And she would be like, why? And she kept asking me why. And if I couldn't explain, she'd be like, well, there's the gap, and we'll bridge it.
Wow, that's so amazing. I think it's so relatable how you said, like, you were so focused on getting the deliverable out. Like, that was your main goal. And I relate to that so much because I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like a cultural thing, but like, we want to be right. We want to make sure we're able to turn things in on time. It's accurate. It's quick. Like,
we want to be productive
We want to be productive. And I feel like that's exactly the way I've been approaching my work too, which is, I think, why you helped me so much. And I was so focused on making sure that the details were there, that like I had crafted this beautiful thing to present to my manager, but all of that means nothing unless you actually understand the why and like why we're doing it. And I think that's where my gap is. And so I think it was great that you were able to walk me through this exact thought process of like start from the beginning and go, and be able to do and say everything that your manager is saying right back without crutch.
Like constantly communicating, even over communicating.
Yeah.
And if your manager is saying something that you don't understand, just paraphrase it. Like, I'm understanding this, is this right? Or if they ask you a question and you don't know the answer, sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I'm not really sure, but here's my thought process.
Right.
Like, and then they can be able to hear my thought process and catch me when things are off or when things don't connect. But it is up to your manager to like help you learn.
Yeah.
And then up to us to, I guess, like if we want to move up and become the manager, we're going to need to know, not just like be able to churn things out and meet deliverables. We're going to need to know.
Why are we doing it?
Exactly. So the later you do that, the more you screw yourself over.
Yeah, I agree.
But there were still areas where I felt like I put in so much hard work and I didn't get the credit that I deserved.
How did you navigate that conversation?
I think I definitely tried to bring it up a few times in my performance reviews.
Okay.
But now I am someone that is like a lot more honest or open about my frustrations.
Yeah.
Because I did have setbacks in my career where I was already, and there weren't giant setbacks, but it was things that were like, okay, I made everything so positive and like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah. And I just like kept my head down and worked.
Girl.
Yeah, I worked really, really hard, kept my head down, kept my mouth shut.
Yeah.
And whenever someone asked me like, how are things going? Great. So great. Like always
robotic almost.
Yeah, like so always the happy person with like no qualms in life, right?
Yeah.
Or work. And in the end, in my performance review, it was like, okay, well, you said it was all great, but like, here are things that you need to work on because of blah, blah, blah. But nobody knew the backstory of any of it because I never voiced it.
Right. I feel like hearing this story makes so much sense with some of the things that you've been talking about more recently with your job.
So, yeah, my current job now, I've been in for like 7 months.
In a completely different role.
And my role was to like build this data center. And as I continued on in this company, I realized like I came into this like clean slate where my job description was me writing it essentially.
Yeah,
and
a lot of freedom.
Yes, I was plopped into the middle of nothing and was like, figure out how to build it. And I was like, who do I go to? Or like, do we have access to these things? Do we have resources? And the answer was always, I don't know, figure it out.
Yeah.
And so for a while I kept my head down just trying to understand the company. And then afterwards I tried talking to all these different people, and then I would report back and be like, everybody said no, or everyone said go see this person.
Right.
And I just got pushed around the company for about 3-4 months.
Yeah.
And then my manager in my mid-year review was like, hey, you need to be more efficient. Like, we hired you for a reason. We need to see some work here.
Yeah.
Like some evidence that you have been working. And and when she said that, I was like, okay, I'm going to keep my head down and keep trying. And then we reached the last bit where I was like, I have been trying for 4 months now with no result. And I have gone in circles talking to heads of teams. And I said, I know you think this is like, this is my priority and this is why I was hired.
Right.
But like, I have continued to update you and I'm getting frustrated because I have tried and I'm just going in circles, and without money, without access, without whatever, like people, support, there's nothing I can do.
Right.
But what really helped was when she acknowledged that what I was going through was like completely okay, because it wasn't my fault. And she was like, the outcome doesn't matter because it's not your fault. It's like, you're right. Nobody else is supporting this.
Yeah.
And if nobody else wants it, like, then we need to figure out a different solution than the data center.
That's so validating.
That is really validating. And that was the first time I think I was ever really vocal about it.
Yeah, that's scary.
It was scary. But then I ended up finding a solution. And you know a little bit.
I do know a little bit about it, but I'd love to hear it again.
The solution was basically that I know this guy who is basically me on a different team.
Right.
Me on a different team, but can also code, which is what I lack and need to build this data center with. And the dilemma I was facing was, do I tell my manager about this guy and potentially like lose my job because he could replace me because his team's future was a bit uncertain, whether like they would close or whatever, or do I keep this to myself and keep the job or keep my job still maybe with no guarantee, but have nothing to show?
Right. And that, when you brought up to me originally, stumped me. I was super confused about that because I've never had an experience before where someone's come after me or like someone stabbed me in the back. I've always looked to my coworkers as a resource in a way that like no one could put me down for. Just because I asked someone to help me do something, it wouldn't make me and my team look worse, right? Like we frequently go to like adjacent teams, ask for help on how to do things, come back, and we report out, right? And I'm someone that when I go into an office space, like my first goal is to make a friend than it is to like learn the material. Like I'm so focused on like creating a fun community. And I'm learning that just like making those fun connections, it's not always the goal.
In the corporate world, like I feel like everybody is kind of out for themselves.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to keep you on payroll if you're not adding value.
Yes.
And you constantly need to be convincing them that they cannot afford to lose you.
Right. I think there's a difference between, like you're saying, adding value, but also being invaluable. Like I'm adding value right now, right? I'm doing my little codes, I'm sending them off, and it's good. And I think it's like, it's needed, but if they lost me, that's what I'm trying to understand now. Could they do this job without me? And if they can, what can I do to make sure that they need me, right?
That's kind of what you asked me too, because you asked me like, well, wait, if this guy's the exact replica of you, what, like, there's no way they can replace you because you must be doing something different than this guy.
Exactly. Why would they have hired you? And I think it caused you to think through all of your entire skill set and how you can be valuable in every way possible.
Yeah. So I think that helped me because I was like, you're right. What is somewhere that I can stand out? And I think what's one thing about me, and it's probably obvious because we have a freaking podcast, is that we love to talk and present and like really try to connect with people and get to know people. And so not only, even though I can't physically code this data center, what comes out of this data center, like if it's being built, which I decided to tell my manager about, and I'm like going on a work trip to work with this guy to build it and risk that. But what comes out of that is like, if I can be part of this building process and learn everything about how this thing is built, I don't need to learn how to code, but I need to learn all the inputs and outputs and like what I should be looking for and how to read all these graphs and charts and interpret them, then I can be that person that is able to present it to people in a way they can understand in a fun, engaging way.
Exactly.
And because nobody else is going on this work trip with me,
Right.
that's where I become hopefully more invaluable.
Exactly. I feel like when you realize that, like a light bulb like went off, because I think you were feeling really down about it.
I was like I convinced myself I was getting replaced.
Yeah, and I was like, wait. Like I actually told you a story about someone else in my company who was really good at coding, but did not know how to talk to people, how to explain something in layman's terms, for lack of a better word. And that's why we had to hire someone else.
And I think that's really crucial to remember. Not that I'm like tooting my own horn or whatever. Like I'm awkward with compliments, but I just think maybe it's the Asian culture in me where these hard skills like coding are so on a pedestal.
Yeah.
Oh, anybody can talk, anybody can do this, but not everyone can code, and not anyone has the time to learn how to code.
And see, I have the exact opposite mind frame about it.
Which is correct.
That anyone can learn how to code. Anyone can go to a boot camp and like figure this out. Not everyone is good at public speaking, and I think being tour guides, like directly affects that. And I think it's one of the best decisions that I made at UCLA was to really understand how to speak to people. Like I had this presentation a few months ago to our EVP, to like everyone in the data org. And I was so scared. I don't like to work on the weekends, but I was practicing in the shower. I was practicing like...
I remember this actually.
Yeah, I was like saying it out loud to you. And
I told you, I was like, I was pumping Emily up in the shower. I was like, you got this, like... I remember.
I was horrified to do this, right? But I leaned back on my tour guide skills, and I was able to like present quite well. And my director like messaged me privately. It was like, "You're a natural at this," and it just like made me feel so much better. And I was just thanking the tour guide God so much.
But I don't think you should just be thanking like the tour guide gods. I think you should be thanking yourself, because you're right. Like it is impossible to learn these skills. Like this is not something you can learn, how to like read a group of people and engage with them, because every group is going to be different.
Right.
That's like from you, but I can't teach you that. No one can teach you that.
And I think that kind of leads back to the whole idea of like politics in the workplace. Like the soft skills like kind of help us be able to navigate some of these harder areas at work that maybe someone that's so focused on the more technical side of the company, they're not thinking about the soft skill part. They haven't developed that part of their careers, right? They haven't had to. But maybe if they had it, they could be able to better maneuver promotions and raises and things like that. And I feel like that's sort of what I'm grappling with and like trying to work out right now.
I think whatever your soft skills are is what makes you invaluable. And I think we're kind of saying the same thing, where it's like, maybe we need to figure out what our strengths are and lean into that instead of focusing on just our weaknesses, right? Like, yes, that needs to improve, but you need to really lean into who you are to be able to, honestly, not even just like succeed in your job, but to be happy and feel fulfilled, right? This sounds super deep, but like in my old job, I was so focused on all my weaknesses that I made myself unhappy in the job, because every day was just a reminder of what I was terrible at. And now this job, I'm like, okay, I actually think presenting and talking to people is super fun.
Yeah.
And now I get to do that as part of my job.
Right.
Part of like playing the game part though is like when I talked to my dad, there was one part where I actually managed to like increase the budget by way more than I had thought from this other project that I was working on. And I was a little bit upset because from the way I read it, I was like, I'm not getting enough credit. Like somewhat like I just want people to know that I wasn't just like MIA for 6 months. I was actually working hard behind the scenes doing all of these things, and I didn't get to say that.
Yeah.
And so I thought, oh, people still probably think I'm just like sleeping at home for 12 hours a day.
Right.
So when he said that, he was like, but you need to know that like you shouldn't just be playing this game of always trying to tell people how much work you've done, or like you shouldn't be playing this game of like not asking for someone else's help because you're afraid they're going to replace you. You took this job to learn something and to grow, and this is going to be on your resume. You told me that too. And now you're going to have this experience going forward anyways.
Yeah.
Actually try and get something out of this job, but also that like our managers and people that are like working with you in this process, they contribute something, right? Whether it's access to a person, that's a huge thing, because I couldn't get access to someone that I really like someone that's super senior.
Right.
And she could. And that like is something that I should be appreciative of, that I was given that opportunity to talk to somebody more senior and lean into her to help me. But also I need to acknowledge that I can help myself.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And like going back to the game like analogy, like these are different players in your game, right? This project is yours and you need to use the right resources and people to get to your end goal, which is exactly what you did.
Basically, this podcast episode is you hearing how we are becoming more jaded.
Exactly, in the corporate world. Yeah.
It's hard.
It's really hard.
And I think these are like the unglamorous things that are revealing themselves. Because when you first graduate, you're like, I'm going to be nice to everyone. I want everyone to be my friend. I want everyone to like me. I'm going to work really hard.
Now we're like, how can we make the most money?
Yeah, exactly. But no. But also, like in college, you would have to do your homework. You would take finals, but you just be buried in the library, right? You never had to be vocal about the work that you put to get an A or like whatever it is. And now it's all about facing people and confronting them.
Something that you and I aren't really predisposed to do very well.
No, if you can't tell already.
Yeah. But I think it's good, like, especially as we're getting, you know, I just had my quote-unquote performance review. Like, you had a mid-year review. I think we're getting towards that season for promotions and raises and stuff where these conversations are going to be so much more prevalent. I mean, already is for us, but maybe for some of you, too, that are going to be having some of these tough calls to make. All right, well, have we spent enough time here, Janice? I think we should get back to work pretty soon.
But, like, I haven't even had my lunch yet.